In this video we're going to look at curb-guided public transport in 4 cities of the world: Paris, France; Essen, Germany; Adelaide, South Australia; and Cambridge, United Kingdom. If we go to Paris, we're going to look at Paris at an elevation of 18 kilometres, and we know that Paris is a very large population, and this is a distance of 4 kilometres times 5, so that's about 20 kilometres across the width of the screen. These black lines represent either the intercity trains or the Paris metro or the Paris street trams. A very large number of rails of various kinds. Some of these rails are not what they appear to be, in that they are not necessarily conventional steel rail trains. Like New York City and many other cities, Paris' so-called underground system actually most of the time is above ground. This is the railway station, Hakim. If you go down to ground level, here is the railway station for the metro, looking towards the Eiffel Tower, and we can see the multi-levels of these buildings where people are living and working. If we go inside this railway station, courtesy of YouTube videos, we can see the train coming in, and we can see that in fact the train's got rubber-tired wheels, and there are guide wheels here to keep the axles away from the side flanges, and here's the flange. And so in fact it's not steel wheels but rubber wheels with a vertical flange on the side like a curb. The central rails I think are carrying electricity, and the rail actually is the rail on the side of the track. It's a curb guided rail system. The rubber-tired system was adopted in Paris after World War II, when they were rebuilding the system, and they realised the advantages of rubber-tired trains being able to go up steeper grades than steel can, and rubber-tired wheels do not damage the track as much, and so you don't have to repair the steel tracks as often. If we exit out of this and just confirm the large number of tracks in Paris, we then go to Essen. After World War II, the country was divided at that point, and the West German government decided, as part of the rebuilding of the country, to standardise the street tram system, because before the war the German tram system, street trains, streetcars, used different gauges in the different lander. So this is Essen, and you can see again the large number of black lines which represent either street trams or S-Bahn, which is the suburban rail system, or the intercity ice trains system. If we go down to Bussentum. This is showing Rossumtum as it is now. When they were changing the gauge of the trams, they also decided to use the tunnels under the old town as a way of removing vehicles from the streets themselves. And also they decided to do an experiment with their buses to actually bring them into the city as well. And because of the need to try and conserve the character of the city, they decided to use tunnels under the city, which were going to carry both the trams and the trolley buses. If we go back in time to Essen, or again courtesy of our YouTube videos, this is the street as it was in an earlier time, and we've got here a bus which they developed called a duo bus. A duo bus was actually a diesel bus and also a trolley bus. It had two engines. It's probably some kind of special differential, so these two engines could drive the wheels. When it was away from the central part of the city, the bus could move around without any need to have continuing wires above it to supply it with electricity. But it meant that when it went in the tunnel, there was no pollution. In a moment in this video, a street tram is going to come at the station. So you've got integration of buses and trams with the one station. And in a minute after that, we're going to have, where this car is, just here we can see a normal diesel bus. So there are three kinds of buses in the city. The complexity was that when the trams went underground, there were two island stations which the trams could handle because they have doors on both sides. But the trolley buses normally had buses on doors on one side, and so in the 991 the buses were modified to have doors on both sides. They also decided, when they were doing the tunnel under the city, to use wooden tracks. Whilst in Paris they'd use steel tracks, and the wooden tracks had the disadvantage that they rotted, and in 999 the system was abandoned under the city because they couldn't get the buses repaired at an economic cost and the tracks needed repairing. If we come forward, we find that the A40, where there used to be trams and trolley buses, which were duo buses at this point, where they're using a diesel section, the diesel buses have replaced the trams. So in fact, Essen still has this is showing the O-Bahn system as it was and the guided rail. The inspiration for this, as we said, came from Paris. And this is as it is now. So there still is an O-Bahn in Essen, but the difference is it's now out in the freeway and doesn't go underneath the city. But the advantage of an O-Bahn is it takes up a very small part of a park, or if you're going down the middle of a freeway, you don't take up much space, and so running down the centre of the A40 is an O-Bahn track. So you've got the place where the trams used to go is now being replaced by the O-Bahn buses. Omnibus is the German word for bus. Bahn is train or track. Bus trains. If we go now back to our view of Essen at 18 kilometres, just confirming the large number of tracks and trains through Essen, we then look at Adelaide, South Australia, at an elevation of 18 kilometres. In this version, the red lines are the railway lines, and just down here is a streetcar for the tram system. There used to be a very extensive tram system through Adelaide, but it all got removed because of the popularity of cars. In Adelaide, in the suburbs, there are actually there are more cars than there are people. This congestion of cars was a problem of transit times from one part of the city to the other, and in the 1970s there was a plan to build a freeway through here along the River Torrens via Modbury to Elizabeth. A new satellite town was being built by the then Playford government. The Playford government lost the elections, and the Dunstan government came and decided to halt the freeway system because it was so unpopular, and decided to try and build an extension of the tram line out to Modbury, because this was going to be subdivided from vineyards into a new outer area for dormitory living. The River Torrens at this stage was seen as a freeway site. The people in this part of the city objected to a tram going through their area, and this question of what was called the MATS plan and the tram system was so contentious. It was taken to the people, an election, and the contract which had been set to build the tram line with some tunnels underneath King William Street were cancelled when the Labor government lost the election and the Tonkin government won the election. This gave them the dilemma of what to do. Having cancelled the tram system, they couldn't resurrect that, so they had to find another solution. And so Minister Wilson went to Germany and discovered that Mercedes-Benz in the city of Munich had looked at the Essen system, which is using wooden tracks in the tunnels and also through the parks and the roadways of Essen. Essen had decided that the wooden tracks were completely unsatisfactory, and Mercedes-Benz came up with a solution using concrete tracks. They signed a contract to build the O-Bahn. O stands for omnibus or bus. Bahn means train, so it's a bus train, which was using the trick from Paris with the curb-sided guidance system, which was using steel tracks, which was adopted in Essen using wooden tracks, and here they're going to use concrete tracks. And contracts were from here at the outer limits of the city of Adelaide, at Gilbert and St Peters, along the River Torrens, what was going to be the Modbury Freeway, to Clemzig, and this point it was going to be called the Clemzig Station. It's now called the Clemzig Interchange. They were in the process of building it when they in turn lost in the election, and the Bannon government won the election with John Clunder as Minister of Transport, and they decided not to cancel the contract but to complete it, and in doing so they then decided to extend it to Paradise before it had been built as far as Clemzig. In fact, they extended it all the way to Modbury before the whole thing was opened. There was a possibility, in fact, that the O-Bahn could have gone on what's now called McIntyre Road down to Elizabeth, following the route of what was going to be the Modbury Freeway, but that didn't get built. So let's look at the O-Bahn as it is now. And this is one of the videos I've made earlier of the Clemzig station. The key feature of the O-Bahn in Adelaide is at the stations, these interchanges, there's complete grade separation, and there's also passing lanes so that express buses can go through a station without having to stop because other buses have stopped to drop passengers. So you have a mixture of express buses and local buses. This is similar to the trick that was used on the Shinkansen in Japan, where one set of tracks can be used by both express vehicles. So the C2 at this point is going to be a local bus, in other words stops at all the stops on the O-Bahn. Buses which are express buses have got X as their end. This video is taken in the middle of the day, and you can see that the O-Bahn is going underneath the outer ring route, so there's no problems of collisions between buses and B-doubles and other vehicles travelling above them. So the O-Bahn is extremely popular, and the travel times from the outer city here in the same area, this is the same area as Paris, we saw, central Paris, is extremely fast and highly successful, to the point where this section of bus system runs at a profit in terms of the fare box. Fare box recovery is greater than the costs of providing the service. The O-Bahn section of the public transport in Adelaide makes a profit. Now we go to Cambridge in the United Kingdom. Again, this is at 18 kilometres. You can see that in fact there's very few rail lines here, and these yellow lines represent the Cambridge O-Bahn system. The difference is this O-Bahn system actually is longer than the O-Bahn system in Adelaide. It's the longest O-Bahn system in the world, and made up of two sections. So we go to Cambridge at ground level at Cambridge North railway station. So this is the railway station, and this is the O-Bahn system in Cambridge, the section where all the buses come together. So it's quite a bit of a walk from the buses, and we can see all the people off the trains catching buses. The O-Bahn system in Cambridge is successful in terms of when it was opened, the patronage was 30% more than they budgeted for. But it was a series of compromises. What they're trying to do in terms of heritage was use some old railway right-of-ways which were going through some swampy areas and across narrow bridges and so on. So here at Trumpington there were some old heritage bridges which are only wide enough for a single O-Bahn track. So most O-Bahns are bi-directional, but here near Trumpington the Cambridge O-Bahn system is single track. The other thing too they're doing in Cambridge is they're using double-decker buses in their streets. So this section up to St Ives is using double-decker buses off the streets with the guide wheels, but here in the section going to Trumpington and to the hospital they are using single normal height buses because the buses can't get underneath these narrow bridges. So what they're doing, wherever possible, they are not destroying the old city of Cambridge, but using right-of-ways where possible and retaining the character of the city. At this point the busway is using normal tarmac, but then it goes on to a guided bus system. The particular problem, however, is that they haven't had enough money to extend the system to avoid problems of collisions at the so this is St Ives. So we come down here to ground level. Oh, that's actually a bridge, an example. Come down to level here. So the O-Bahn and Cambridge at this point is using the old right-of-way for an old railway line, and there's no passing loops, no passing lanes for buses. So if there are a large number of buses running here, they all have to wait their turn at the station. This same problem occurred in Brazil with the BTR systems that they built in Brazil. So you can see that the O-Bahn comes to intersections. So the O-Bahn system in Cambridge, you can see here's the double-decker bus coming through, has to stop at the intersections. Is highly successful, and 30% more patrons use the system than they budgeted for. So in summary, public transport obviously is always a compromise in terms of providing a need for the city without destroying the city. In Cambridge, the right-of-way was very narrow, and so they adopted the O-Bahn because the O-Bahn system used a smaller amount of real estate to move large numbers of people. Similarly in Paris, the flange system was used to move large numbers of people. In Essen, large numbers of people are used with guided system. But where there is more space, busways which don't use flanges can be adopted. The O-Bahn systems are successful solutions for difficult locations.